Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of The Other Side of Addiction. And as you can see, I'm not in the living room. I don't have my backdrop. We're not in a studio. We're in the mix of I'm just going to say it, a shitload of chaos. Because really, for our guest, Lynnee, this is her home that's being remodeled. And I'll have to say, I'm part of the remodel, which I'm very grateful for. It's got to be really chaotic. I mean, they're living in their basement while we have their main floor and their upstairs completely gutted. And we're redoing walls, we're redoing everything, basically, windows, flooring, it's all being done. Can you imagine going through that as a homeowner? Also, can you imagine what it's like going through the chaos and the pain of a loved one that's battling addiction, whether it's your child or whether it's your spouse? So that's why today's topic is, I got to make sure, finding calm in the chaos. And see, I got goosebumps already. We need to find that calmness for ourselves, because when we find that calmness in ourselves, it actually helps those who are battling the addiction. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to my guest, Lynnee. Lynnee, thank you for being here.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So you and I met at the gym.
We did.
And we just started talking, and you were looking for someone to do like remodels and things like that. However, we started doing a little bit more talking, and you started opening up about your son who's battled with addiction.
Yes.
And things that you and your family have gone through. And I love to have guests who are on the other side, because we make a lot of mistakes, right?
100%.
A ton of mistakes, not meaning to, thinking that we're there, that we're helping our loved. Did you find that out as well when all this chaos started happening in your life?
Yes. So for me, the aha moment came, I guess the backstory is our struggle as a family. My son started using right around the age of 13. And I mean, it was little stuff then, whether it be just pot or pills or, drinking's never really been his thing, but little things like that. And then it escalated. We've tried every intervention possible, including sending him away to a boarding school for troubled boys when he was still a teenager. And of course, that has then escalated in its use to a point where he became a meth addict and ended up in prison. He is currently now serving his second prison sentence. He is 24 years old, will be 25 in October, and he is in prison for the second time for either drug-related or drug charges, all because of meth. So everybody's got their own drug, and for my family, meth is the swear word, and it's our chaos.
Right.
And so throughout that time, as a mom, you see all these red flags happening with your child. You see all the things that we're taught as parents, watch for these things. And if these things are happening, those are red flags. But what nobody tells you is what to do when you see the red flags. There's no resources out there for you. I spent a few years between him being in counseling. I would talk to counselors. Then he got medicated for a wrong diagnosis. Oh, he must have ADD, so let's put him on medication. So I would talk to the psychiatrist. I met with pastors. I met with his doctor, like his pediatrician at the time. That was a good one. The pediatrician once told him, "You just need to try harder." That was good advice.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we've just, it's all over the gamut of what people are willing to accept as a reality. And they just often don't want to see that what is really happening is a reality. So they just brush it off. He has ADD. He doesn't apply himself. He's being lazy.
Just stop.
Just stop. Right. Just don't do that anymore.
Right. Yeah.
Or as a parent, when your friends don't understand why you're living with this constant drama, because that's what it becomes. I have two children that are mine. We are a blended family, and then I have 3 stepchildren that are older. So as my kids were growing up, the older 3 were basically they were out of the house when all this started. So it was just my 2 kids in the house, and they're a year apart in age, and it was my younger one who he I always, there's guilt that I carry because I feel like a lot of his childhood was us always putting out the fires that his brother caused. And so we were attending to a lot of the fires, as I put it. And he was always the easygoing kid. So we always were like, well, he'll be fine. And he is fine, and he's great, and he's rocking it and owning life, and he's serving our country, and he's making amazing adult decisions. But when I look back at childhood, I think, how much was I not paying attention because I was so busy constantly putting out fires? So that chaos, all of that comes, we're trying to deal with, like, how do you deal with red flags? We're trying to figure out, how do we cope with these things? All those resources that I would turn to, thinking pastors, doctors, counselors, psychiatrists, somebody will have the answers for me. And every person that I would turn to and say, please tell me what resources I can use. I don't know. Oh, I don't know. I was literally just flabbergasted at how little people know of resources. That is one thing I would love to carry forward as a parent who has been through this, is how do I help communicate better what resources are out there? Because I swear it's our country's best kept secret. They're out there. There's amazing programs out there. It is harder when your loved one is a minor. That is a more difficult road to navigate. Once they become an adult, then it opens up a little bit more. Thanks, insurance world. It's a mess. Thank you. I guess blame the lawyers. But I mean, it's one of those things that just creates this really trepidous field to navigate when it comes to trying to work with a minor. But that doesn't help families, because a lot of the problems, they're starting younger and younger and younger. And you've got kids who are in 6th grade who are already being exposed to all the drug use out there.
My gosh, I had a guest on the show who was a full-blown alcoholic when he was in junior high.
Ugh.
By the time he hit junior high, he started drinking when he was 5.
Yeah.
So you're right.
Yeah.
It starts earlier and earlier.
Well, and for some families, it is a cycle of repeating itself. They are growing up in families where that is what they've taught, what they have been taught. They are, if that's one thing I would say loud and clear today, is that there is no formula that fits a family with addiction.
Yeah.
Addiction shows no prejudice.
It doesn't. Yeah, it doesn't care. It is not prejudice.
No,
it doesn't care who
it doesn't
you
care
are,
if you have money, if you're educated, where
Yeah.
you live. I mean, some of those factors all can influence, and it does affect our odds, or the statistics of addiction, but it does not. I mean, if somebody would have told me when I was in college and dreaming of getting married and having a family that this would have been a road I would have ended up on, I would have laughed in their face, and I would have said, that doesn't happen to me.
right?
That we have a good family,
Yeah.
and we love each other, and we go to church on Sunday, and it doesn't matter. Addiction doesn't care. I feel like that shingles doesn't care. Well, addiction doesn't care. It just doesn't.
So when you said you went to all these people, no one really had a resource for you at all. Now I want our listeners to know, Lynnee and her husband, they're not from Utah. They're from Wisconsin. Right?
Originally from Illinois and Michigan.
Okay.
We met and married in Wisconsin. My kids were raised in Wisconsin.
Okay. So, and Green Bay's a lot smaller than Utah.
A lot,
right? You have what,
100,000
and something thousand. So that's like what West Jordan was when my parents got to West Jordan in
Okay.
1970.
Okay.
However, it's the same here.
It doesn't matter where you live.
That's what I'm comparing, right?
Yeah.
Because it is the same here. We have this huge city.
Yeah.
And there are so many new resources out there.
Yeah.
And people don't have a clue.
They don't know about it.
I was speaking with our good friend Robin from Tosa today.
Yeah.
And I said, hey, I've got this kid who really wants to meet you. He's with White Tree Medical. And she goes, I've never heard of him. And I'm like, they've been around for 5 years. And she goes, what do they do?
And do the listeners all know about Tosa? Because there's our big plug, the Other Side Academy.
Yeah, the Other Side Academy. Yeah. And a lot of our listeners hear me talk about Tosa a lot. So
Tosa's,
I'm a huge supporter of Tosa and Redbarn and Natsu and Clean Slate Utah and a lot of different, there's a few. So she had no clue. And so she goes, well, give me a little heads up on who they are. And I told her about Chris, who's going to be calling her.
Okay.
And she goes, oh my gosh, he sounds like my kind of people, right? Chris sold his company to go work for White Tree Medical because of what they were
Okay.
doing to help other people.
Okay.
He went through the program, so he knows how the program helped him in his recovery, because he's in long-term recovery.
Got it.
For someone to sell a business,
That fan, keep talking.
oh, okay, for someone to sell a business and to go into a whole different career, but he realized it's because he wanted to help people. So again, whether you're from Green Bay, whether you're from Salt Lake City,
Or whether you're from,
we don't know, especially
Yeah.
as family members,
yeah.
right?
And again, I don't know what it is about, if it's the whole legalities with the world of minors, but that was the struggle I came up with.
Yeah.
Now that he's an adult and, so the chaos has changed, as a child, I felt as the parent, it is my job, literally, it's my job as a mom, as a parent, to get you to adulthood. Like, that's my job.
Yeah.
And I would say that it is my job to produce a productive member of society. That is what I would hope for. I would hope that my children became productive members of society. So as a Christian woman, I would say I want them to be a God-fearing, productive member of society. But either way, Bo's not yet. And he's he is not giving to society right now. He is taking from society. And as dealing with as a mom, when he was a minor, that was my job. My job was, I was in charge of that. Those were my responsibilities. Now he's an adult. And so those responsibilities do shift onto him at this point. Those are not my responsibilities. I don't own that chaos anymore. I don't own that fear anymore. And it didn't change just because he turned 18. That changed because I did a lot of self-work,
Yeah.
When you start to realize what it is I can be held responsible for and what it is I cannot. That is my first step that I learned on how to find calm, because I had to let go of the fact that I wasn't responsible for his addiction. I am not responsible for his addiction.
Or his choices.
Or his choices. Where I am at now with him is that I can look at my son. I love him unconditionally. There is nothing he will ever do that will make me not love him. But this is his journey, not mine. It's his. And I have to let him walk that. And as a person of faith, I truly choose to believe that God has a plan for this human. He is a child of God, and God has a plan for him. I don't know what that plan is. On the flip side of that, I also believe that when our purpose is served here on earth, it's our time to go. I don't know when that will be. There are really good odds right now that tell me that my son might not live to see a productive life of adulthood.
That's gotta be hard.
It is.
That's gotta be tough.
It's a reality that we just have to accept. I don't want that to be the
Of
truth.
course.
I want him to be one of those people that beats the odds and comes out of the other side of addiction and is able to then use his story maybe and help other people. If I could back up, because obviously to your listeners right now, my son is an addict. My son is a meth addict. My son has created a lot of chaos in my life. But yeah, I'm mom, so I will be biased and there's no other way for me to do it. But I know him, and I know him from his heart. I know him from little on. And I can tell you honestly, he is one of the funniest, best sense of humor people I've ever met. He is one of the most nurturing human beings I have ever met. All he wants to do is take care of other people. If anything, that is contributed in his addiction, and the fact that he will then allow himself to get used by people that aren't good for him and that don't want what's right for him. And they don't care about him. Like, they're going to take advantage of the fact that he will, and when you're a kid and your mom always used to say, if all your friends jumped off a bridge, would you do it too?
Okay, I heard that so many times.
Yeah,
Yeah, right?
my son would. He'd jump off the bridge if you would be his friend. Like, that was who he was. So when I look at him now as this adult, I just, we have insulation blowing on us. I'm just letting you
Just
know.
to show you guys, this is the chaos, right?
Just insulation.
Yeah, it's
raging.
not snow.
So he has so many beautiful, beautiful attributes.
Yeah.
He's intelligent beyond all belief. Did he apply any of that? No. Did he drop out of high school? Yes. Does he have a long way to go? 100%. But there's so much there about him that give him all these positive attributes that I so pray he will believe in someday himself and use those to become an amazing human being that I know is in there. That's the part that then as a parent, you look at this person. I've known this person from the minute they were born. I knew this person before he was born. I've known his personality. I know every fear, I know every movement. And yet to then have to take on the acceptance and there's no other word, it's absolute acceptance to know he might not live through this.
You know, I can get emotional talking about this. Again, it's such a huge fear of ours, right? Being on the other side.
Huge.
You know, because I talked about the last time I dropped my wife off at detox up at LDS hospital.
Mhm.
I was so mad, so angry. She couldn't even really stand. She couldn't even really talk. And guys, this may sound really rude to a lot of our listeners. I'm being vulnerable and I'm being upfront. I literally got her out of the car, grabbed her suitcase, threw it on the lawn, and I said, good luck.
Mhm.
There's security there. They're seeing I'm putting you
They'll
on the
come get
lawn. I'm done. And I remember driving off, looking in the rearview mirror, my eyes just starting to fill with tears, going,
Mhm.
this will be the last time I see her alive in my rearview mirror. Because that's how drunk she was. I mean, she couldn't even function. She was literally hallucinating.
Wow.
That's how much alcohol she had in her. And all the way home, I was beating myself up, right? Why did I just do that?
Mhm.
This could be the last time. I really needed to be there.
Yeah.
So now I start beating myself up.
If I had been home, maybe she wouldn't have drank that.
Right.
If I had been there, maybe he wouldn't have done this.
And it takes us a long time, right?
A
It
long
takes us a
time to
long
not-
time to realize we have to have some boundaries. We have to stick to those boundaries as hard as it is.
Yeah.
The faith, we have to have the faith that
Yeah.
God is going to watch over them, going to help direct them or open their eyes
Yeah.
or shoot
And
across
your
their
faith,
bow.
your faith can be whatever it is for you.
Whatever works
Right,
for you,
right.
yeah,
I mean, for
yeah.
me, it is.
I'm not talking religion.
No, I am.
Okay.
For me, it is.
Okay,
It is an
yeah.
absolute, it is. It's what keeps me grounded in this world. And it is what allowed me to be able to navigate this. And just to be able to take a deep breath and
Mhm.
believe and be able to accept that it is his journey, not mine. And that I do have, like, I'm involved in it. And while it is this chaos, I am a part of the chaos, but I am not the chaos. I'm just in it. So I get to then make choices to decide, do I want to stay in it? How much do I want to be in it? How can I control my involvement in it? So all of that has come over years. And to cite one source that was an amazing eye opener to me, I was never somebody who would click on videos while scrolling Facebook. I looked at my friends' posts and that was it. There was a suggested post one day, and this was before Bo went to prison for the first time. And he was actively using, I knew that things were just completely out of control. My husband and I had decided to have him live in the house because we felt that at least if he was living in our house, then we could keep him alive. And when you're dealing with a minor, he wasn't even 18 yet. So when you're dealing with a minor, your thought is, it's my job to keep him alive. And if we can keep him alive long enough for him to go, what am I doing? Then we've helped and we've won and we've done and we've beaten it, right? Like, that's kind of the way we approach this. So he was living in our house. It was awful. it's just constant. You don't know if he's coming home. You don't know when he's coming home. So it got to a point, he had turned 18 and I had kicked him out. And I said, I have 3 rules for living in my house. Be nice, don't do drugs, have a job. Those 3 things. Like, if you're not in school, if you were a student, you're a student. But
Right.
so I was like, those are my 3 rules. I don't think they're that hard. And he was failing at all 3 of them miserably. He wasn't nice. He was doing drugs. He wasn't working. It was just chaos. And I had told him that if that's your choices, then you cannot live in my home. So he had moved out, and I spent the next 18 months with him living on the streets. I knew he would sleep in cars. He knew what parks the cops visited at night to know if he could get away with staying there overnight. Again, Green Bay, Wisconsin, not warm. I kicked him out in October, maybe, it was probably the beginning of October. And he didn't come home until the following January. He had reached out every now and then. He'll give me a text message or a phone call. And it would always come from random phone numbers. And he would just let me know, hey, it's me. I'm just letting you know I'm alive. And I appreciated that. He knew how much I worried. I mean, I prayed constantly. I was constantly in prayer, that God would protect him until. That was always my prayer. Could you just protect him until? I don't know what until meant, but just protect him until. And, there were several incidences where it was really evident that he was protected in that moment, that he didn't go down with that bust, or he didn't, all these things. Ironically, that ultimately what I believe saved him was getting busted. Like taking him to prison is what saved his life. I don't believe that incarceration is going to solve our addiction problem in this country, but it will keep them alive. And for those that can decide this isn't the life for me anymore, then prison was their life savior. And that's what they need. So whether it's, I know that's a political hot topic about incarceration over drug use, and that they don't need prison, they just need rehab. And who pays for that rehab? Like we have so many of those pieces that don't work yet. So in one of those crazy moments where he's living out on the streets and I don't know what I'm doing, and I'm thinking I just need to bring him back home, and I just need to compromise and A, B, C, and D, right? I'm scrolling on Facebook early one morning, and this video pops up. I've never seen this person's face before. I don't know who this person is. I don't know the name, but I decided to click on it. I have no idea why. Click on it, and it was Tiffany Jenkins. For any of you who don't know, and if you're looking for resources, Tiffany Jenkins is a recovering addict, wrote a book called High Achiever. You can follow her on social media under Juggling the Jenkins, things like that. She is amazing at sharing her story and giving support and strength and hope to people. It really, and she's freaking hilarious. Anyway, if you see this, Tiffany, I just would love to sit and have coffee. I just think it'd be fabulous. Anyway,
let's have coffee and do a podcast.
I know, let's do it. So I click on this video, not knowing who she is. And she's whispering, and she's sitting in a closet, and she's got her phone, and she said, I'm sitting in my closet in the middle of the night making this video. Why am I doing this? I don't know, but I believe that somebody out there needs to hear what I'm going to say. And I am drawn into this like a moth to a flame. I was just glued. Like, what is this woman going to say? And again, I don't know anything about her, so I don't know if she's going to talk about something I care about or not. And the next thing she says is how one of the most common questions she gets asked is, how do you know the difference between loving your addict and enabling your addict? She doesn't use the word addict, so let me rephrase that. How do you know if you're loving or enabling your loved one? And I was like, oh gosh, I have to hear this. And she went on to say basic advice. And I love this. To this day, I live by this. If your addict is happy with you, you're enabling. Period. That means you're giving into everything they want. As long as they get what they want, they're happy.
Right.
But the minute we say no to them, the minute we don't agree with whatever manipulation they're pulling at this time, we are enabling. And I knew that if I continued to enable him, I was literally going to love him to death. I would kill him. And I couldn't guarantee that if I sent him out that door and locked it and said, you're not coming back, I couldn't guarantee that he wouldn't die as well. But at this point, as a parent, I am extremely at peace, knowing there is nothing I haven't done. There is nothing I haven't tried. We have tried every doctor, every counselor. We have tried medication. We've tried no medication. We've tried homeschooling. We tried back to school. We changed school district. We tried online schools. So this is all still as a minor. And then now you get him as an adult. And I have worked with, again, counseling, finding resources, getting him in rehab centers that he leaves. I have found, like, have him come live with me. No, you can't live with me. Have him come live with me. No, you can't live with me. Like, it is a constant dance that we try to figure out, but I have taken him to specialty doctors. I have taken him across the country to see a specialty doctor. I've done everything that we possibly as a family could do. Resources and energy both applied, financial and emotional resources. And I know at this point that it's not on me. And I know that as a mom, if he's in prison right now, so if he gets out of prison and relapses and dies, I know that there's nothing more I could have done. So I think that might be a little bit why, as hard as it is for me to say that as a mom, and I know I'm not getting emotional, and it's really just because we're in this conversation and it's keeping me focused. But it's not because I'm cold-hearted. It's not because I don't care. Part of it is sometimes you can only cry so much.
Well,
You just exhaust yourself with it. And the other part of it is I've learned you can only control, or you should only worry about what you can control. And I can't control his next move.
Yeah.
I can control me. I can control my involvement in those, whatever moves he decides to make. But I can't control what he's going to do. One of our latest experiences, this was right before he was arrested this last time and sent back to prison. My husband and I were traveling abroad, not even in this country. I'm getting text messages from him because, again, he's not incarcerated. And they were friendly, chatty conversations. Oh, what are you doing? Oh, I'd send him pictures. And it was just this really, great friendly conversation back and forth. And all of a sudden he's gone. He's not answering me. He's not responding. He's not, like, nothing. And in that very same day, I see a post on Facebook of a great person I know in Green Bay who runs a sober living community. She runs the DarJune house. I'm going to plug it because it's a great organization. She had posted on Facebook that very same day that she says, I don't know what's hitting Green Bay right now, but I think there were, and I'm going to misquote it, I want to say there were 12 overdose deaths that week alone, in 1 week in one city that she knew of. And she said she personally had 9 funerals to go to the next week. 9. So there's a huge issue with any of our drugs out there. I don't care if it's marijuana you're smoking or if it's heroin you're shooting up. I don't care what it is, it's getting laced. And that's the biggest fear. So whatever it was that was happening. So I read this post on the very same day that I realized he's not answering me anymore. So I wait another day, shoot him another text, no answer. I went like 2-3 days. Finally, I sent him the official, okay, just send a thumbs up. I'm officially worried. Now, as a mom of an addict, I know that most of the time he won't talk to me when he's using. So again, as meth of his drug of choice, when he's tweaking, he avoids mom.
Right.
I also become the enemy. And I don't know why. When he's not using, I am not the enemy. When he's using, I am the worst human being in this world. I don't know why. So I've just learned to kind of, that roller coaster goes, and I choose not to get scared that there came the drop, right? I've just gotten used to it. So I knew in that moment, if he's not answering me, he's probably just got done using. He's going to avoid me. So if I send him, and this has come over years of being through this with him, we're now on, 12 years, 11 years of constant learning how to live with somebody who's in addiction. And I've learned, he knows that if I send him please, I'm worried, he will at least send me a thumbs up. Then because all he knows in that moment is that mom needs to know you're not dead.
Right.
That's it. That's all I need to know. And I got nothing. And another 2 days go by. And I am like, here I'm trying to enjoy this vacation with my husband. We have been planning this vacation since pre-COVID because it got canceled how many times? Now we're finally on this vacation for, that we've been planning for years. And I am losing now a second day over just being like so distracted by my fear. And again, I turned to prayer because that's who I am. That is what works for me. And I turned to prayer about it. And I thought, okay, give me calm, give me strength, help me realize that in this moment, I cannot worry and trust God at the same time. I can't.
Right.
If I'm going to trust God, then what am I worrying for? Then he's got this. And if I don't believe God's got this, well, then I got to worry about something I can't control. So it occurred to me in that moment, take a deep breath. If he has overdosed, if he has died, you worrying is not going to change that. You can't, it's not going to undo it. If he hasn't overdosed, you in Europe worrying about it isn't going to stop it from happening. On no day, I don't care if I'm in Utah, I don't care if I'm in Green Bay, I don't care where I am. My worrying is never going to stop him from overdosing. And so to have taken that deep breath in that moment and say, I can't control this. I had to give it to God and let it go. And I did. And I went on to have a fabulous vacation. Now, maybe the answered prayer in all of this is that very next night after I came to that aha moment, my phone rings late at night and I answer the phone. And as I pick up my phone and look at it, underneath the number, it says prison/jail. And I went, oh, thank you, Jesus. You know, because what that told me is he was alive.
Yeah,
and that's all I cared about in that
that's all
moment
you
is he's alive. And if they've picked him up again, then there's another chance for him to pardon me, get his head out of his ass, and realize he has to accept some intervention and some help. Like that is the bottom line we need to get to, because I as mom cannot help him with this. I don't have those skills. I have never struggled with a substance addiction. My closest thing to addiction is sugar and remodels. I mean, that is literally what I do. I just,
Yeah, she was only gonna remodel the kitchen. Now the whole damn house is, no, I'm just kidding.
and it's why I do,
Right.
it's why I do it for a living. Because if I do it for other people, then I'm not doing it to my own house. But this is my own project. But it is one of those things that you have to realize. And I know that's not a luxury statement. Please don't take it that way. I don't mean you have, you know, that's not me shaking,
Yeah. Yeah, right.
not put my hand on my hip. I believe that for any of us who love somebody in addiction, we have to figure out a way to accept that we can't control it. We can love them through their addiction, but that love has to come with boundaries. It has to. So, and even an example of that, here I am almost 10 years of living this, right? So my son, he has been in and out of trouble with law since he was 13 years old. That's when it started. Getting expelled from schools, getting arrested as a minor, so therefore going through like the juvenile processing, and they would put him on a deferred prosecution and he would do probation, and he always came out clean and gleaming and just shiny and looking like a brand new penny. And they would all look and say, well, you have a good family that loves you and they support you and we know you can do this. And he kept getting off, light sentence, light sentence, light sentence. And then it escalated. Of course, then the behavior just keeps escalating. Nothing's ever stopping him. So he just kept escalating and escalating. And where was I going with that? That was a new rabbit hole. Sorry.
You were just going back how we started out.
Yeah, being able to realize like, oh, boundaries. Thank you. That in all of this has been years of this. So when he was 13, he's now almost 25. So let's say that this has been, 12 years of this. So for a solid 10, I as a mom have been trying to figure out how to harness this wild animal of addiction. It's like, what can I do to control it, right? I'm going to break it. No, I can't. Who do I think I am? So one of the things I've learned though, is that I can love him, but there has to be boundaries, because otherwise we as the loved one, we get put through the ringer over and over and over again. We are the target of their anger. We are the target of unsafety. I don't know if I worded that right, but
I'm going with it.
Okay,
Yeah, because
okay.
it sounded right to me. Yeah.
We are constantly put in a vulnerable, dangerous position. And I know that sounds overly dramatic. I've been robbed twice. And only once he was involved and he was completely high on meth, barely remembers it. I know 100%. My son would never do that to me. My son on meth
would. Yeah.
I have no idea what he would do. No idea. Won't even guess. The time before that were his friends. Everybody knew we were out of town, totally partied in our house, robbed it, took jewelry, money, everything they could imagine, left it a disastrous mess. So I've been through that twice. So when I say that we are put in dangerous situations, I mean that literally.
Mhm.
You know, if I'm a woman who happens to be home alone, if for anybody, I don't care if you have a person in addiction or not, if somebody comes into your house to rob it, you have to assume they're on something.
Right.
Most people don't do that sober. So it's not safe. But for those of us who love people in addiction, they have a circle of people who now are at an increased risk of being on something and knowing that you have maybe something that they could have access to. So our danger is increased.
Well, and their fear increases too, right?
Yes,
Because their brain's going 1,000 miles an hour.
yes, I don't
You
know.
have no clue. They may not come in to do harm to you,
No,
but it can change.
it can
in an
change like
instant.
that. They didn't think you were gonna be home
Right.
or
And again, it's not them. It's the drugs.
depending on what they're on, they
It's
become
the
Superman.
drugs, right? Yeah.
I can't fight that
But
as a woman, right?
however, it's still not them as who they normally would as an individual, right?
Right,
Because my wife started going through some things where she literally stopped herself. She goes, "This is against my morals."
Mm.
But she was almost going there, and it was because she was drinking. She was so wasted, right? She almost went further than what she needed to go.
exactly.
Yeah.
The decisions they make are not, I'd like to say they're not their own. That does not set them free.
No, it's not
from
an
the
excuse.
decisions.
It's not an excuse.
They are still culpable.
because they still chose to.
Absolutely, absolutely.
right?
So it doesn't let them off the hook, but it helps us as loved ones to say, how can my own son rob me?
It's our comfort.
You're like, how does that happen? Right. And that's because I will never know how any person would act on any drug. So with the boundaries, here we are 12 years into it, solid 10 of me really recognizing that this was an addiction issue that I'm dealing with. And I don't know, it was like a month ago. So he was arrested in March and he's been incarcerated since. His parole was revoked. So then he got sent back to prison, which is where he is now. And in there, he made a phone call to me. And of course, now I'm the evil one. Either A, he's still getting drugs in prison, or B, he's coming down. And so he's extremely agitated, but I become the enemy. And his biggest fight at this moment was he wanted me to be promising him that I was going to give him money that was going to set him up when he gets out of prison. Because without that money, I quote him, "You might as well put the needle in my arm." So now he's blaming me, telling me that if I don't give him money, I'm basically at fault if he dies. I'm the one who killed him. Okay, this is how it goes. And I just told him, I was very calm and I said, that is your choice to feel that way. I am not giving you money. I completely disagree with you. And at that, the timed phone call from prison cuts you off, and that was the end of it. So I hang up the phone knowing that I handled it the way I needed to. But as a loved one, as a mom, I now feel like a sack of shit. And I'm left sobbing. And at this point in the game, I get so angry that I still allow that to happen. Because the only reason that I feel that way is because I have allowed him to treat me like that yet again. And that's on me. So that is where I have to learn even better how to make those boundaries and keep them. They're really easy to now. I've reset myself. I know my boundaries. He and I have had that conversation since. I wouldn't take a phone call for him. It was over a month before I picked up the call again. And I only picked up the call on the advice of a mutual friend of ours, who is somebody who's come through to the other side of addiction and is a great source of guidance and
information.
And it really is. It's the best that any of us can do who are living in this, is to be able to learn from those who have become better at identifying and better at walking that path. So on that advice, I took the next phone call. I wasn't going to yet. I was going to let it go. I swear to God, I wasn't going to answer that phone till Christmas. And he had said to me, I would take the call, but I would make sure that you reiterate your boundaries. And if that goes well, then you can resume your normal. And my normal boundary is I'll only pay for one phone call a week. That's all I'll take. So I was like, okay, I could do that. And he said, but if that doesn't go well, then you let it go another month, maybe 2 before you answer again. But now he knows why you're not answering. You have to, you're almost dealing with a childlike mentality. You would think it would be obvious he knows why I'm not answering the phone. So when I took that next phone call, He acted like nothing was wrong. And I thought, okay, I took a deep breath and I said, do you understand why I haven't been taking your phone calls? He said, well, yeah, because you work all the time and I call at the most inappropriate times and you can't pick up. God love him. So, to quote my brother, I was like, bless your heart. But I said, while sometimes that is the case, that is not why I haven't been taking your calls. And I reiterated to him, I do have boundaries, and you crossed hard boundaries on that last phone call. You're downright mean to me, and I'm not paying for those phone calls.
Yeah.
So let's go over that again. It is your choice if you want me to be on the phone with you. And if I'm going to be on the phone with you, then you're going to treat me with respect. You're going to speak to me kindly, or I don't take phone calls. So that was like a phone call ago. And then I just spoke to him again last night and had a fabulous conversation with him. Is some of that because I reiterated boundaries? Possibly. Sometimes when we as loved ones reset those boundaries, it is a pun intended, it is a sobering moment for them. But they have to be reset and reset and reset. And because again, you're dealing with somebody who, it's like they forget what you say,
right,
week after week after week. So anyway, setting boundaries is another way that I have learned to control my chaos, is that I get to control how much I go on the ride. So when I got that phone call and I hang up and I am sobbing, I am allowing that to happen. And I am allowing myself to feel that bad. And so by setting the boundaries, I now get to make that choice and I get to say, I'm not going to feel like that. Because again, this isn't my shit show.
Right. The problem, I mean,
The problem is we love them.
It is. We love them, and we actually hook that freaking chain, that ball and chain to us.
And then we cut it. Oh, but then we put it back on.
Then we put it back on, right? Yeah.
Because, and again, I can only speak from a mom perspective. I'd like to say that as a spouse, I would be like, I don't need this.
Yeah.
What are you doing to me? But as a mom, I feel like, again, this has been this human that I have known.
You grew that
before it took breath, right? I mean,
Yeah.
but even for a parent, maybe in an adopted situation, I don't mean to belittle that. So, I mean, this child from the moment it took breath. I swear I know when he's breathing different. Like, that's how well you know that human. And so you can't hate them. I hate what he does. I freaking hate addiction, hate meth, hate anything, I hate it all, but I can't hate him because I know the heart that's in him. I know the human being that he really is.
It's like, you love this cup.
Mm-hmm.
You love how it looks, how it sparkles. But instead of putting water in it that tastes good, you're putting vinegar in it, right?
Yes, and you keep
It's
drinking it
not the
because I love the cup.
It's not the cup, right? It's what's inside of it.
Yes,
So basically
yes.
Because I mean, as a parent, it's like I had someone call me once and said, hey, I've got this good friend who has a son, he's battling alcohol. Okay. I was telling her about you. His son does rodeo, who's in Wyoming. She lives in Idaho. Would you be willing to speak with her? Yeah, I'd be more than happy to. We end up getting on a phone call and we get talking, and she's just telling me everything that's been going on. And she goes, what advice can you give me? And I took a page out of like Dave DeRocher's book, right? May I speak openly?
Yeah.
Because I'm going to tell you how I'm seeing it,
Right.
right?
Some people don't want to hear our honest.
Well,
our raw
they
truth.
don't, because,
Right.
and I just had someone do that to me a couple of weeks ago.
Okay.
As soon as I got done saying, they're like, okay, well, thank you, I got to go.
It was
They
too
ended the
much for them.
conversation like that.
Yeah.
Now, so I said, look, you're in a whole different ballpark than I'm in. Yours is your son. Mine was my spouse. I can say, I'm done, get the hell out, we're getting a divorce. She could say the same thing to me, whatever. But when it's your child, that's a whole different ballpark. That's how I'm seeing it. And I said, all you can do is what you said a few times during the show. I love you. I care about you. You're more than welcome to talk to me. When you talk to me nicely, if you yell, scream, you have to set those boundaries. And I says, other than that, I says, all due respect, there's not a damn thing you can do.
No.
And she's going, I know, but he's such a good kid. And I'm like, no. I'm not saying he's not.
Yeah.
You're going, yeah, but Yeah, but there is no
There
yeah,
is no
but. Because for 7, 8 years, I did the same thing you did, Lynnee. I did the same thing over and over and over. And I kept putting myself down that rabbit hole. You and I talked about it. It says it's like if you see an Exorcist movie, it's like wham, you're slammed against the wall and then slammed on the floor and slammed to the ceiling.
Yes.
And then you're back on your feet again. You're like, what the hell just happened?
Yes.
Right. And then
Yes.
wham, you're against the wall again.
Yes.
I got the same results every single time. Still doing my best to go, take my hands.
Yeah.
Come here, let me show you the way. I love you. So where this whole thing started with the boundaries. Literally, those boundaries are your lifeline.
Yeah.
They are literally
That is your calm in the
freaking
chaos.
lifeline.
That
It
is your calm in the chaos. And the
It
minute you
is.
lose those boundaries, it's all chaos.
Yeah.
If
You're-
we don't have boundaries, we have no calm.
Yeah, you're off in so many different directions again. So I don't know how many of our listeners know that my wife and I are separated. Okay, she relapsed after 2.5 years, and she's given me permission to talk about it. So
Good,
I'm
good.
not just talking about it like I used to before. I asked, she gave me her permission, say you're fine to do it. My boundaries I had to set because again, I started finding myself being drawn back. My anger, how
Mhm.
upset, how my heart, I mean, I literally felt like someone took my heart out and just freaking stepped on it, right?
Mhm.
I had to kick her out. As hard as it was, and she was still drunk.
Wow.
And that's so hard.
Well, and there's a phrase when you're talking to somebody who you can't, your argument doesn't get through to.
Mhm.
And it doesn't, not somebody who's drunk. Let's say you're at a party. Let's say you're at work. Let's say you're at the gym.
Yeah.
And you're having this conversation with somebody, but it seems like what you're saying is just falling on deaf ears. I always love the phrase, it's like arguing with a drunk guy. You're never going to win the argument because they can't logically receive what you're saying. So you literally are in that position.
Yeah.
Where you were arguing with somebody who was drunk and she couldn't receive anything that you were saying. All
No,
she saw was red.
That's all it was. And it wasn't her, right? Again,
Correct.
it's never their fault, ever their fault.
Well,
You know, I mean, that's what I got out of mine. It's like, it was always, and I always was told too, that you're a big part of it. Oh, I am.
yeah,
I went to the liquor store and bought you the bottle and said,
right,
here,
right.
you drink.
Oh, okay.
Right?
You're being facetious when you say it's never their fault.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
Well, it's never our fault, or it's always
It's
our fault.
always our fault.
Not, yeah, it's not, they don't take accountability,
Right.
right? And it's hard for us. And
Yeah,
it's
they're
hard
never.
it's hard for all of us,
Yeah.
right? It really is hard for all of us.
Yeah.
I am not. Thank you, though.
That's funny.
Okay, all right, thank you. Yeah, I hurried and ate before I came over here because I knew it was gonna be late, but thank you, Joe. Yeah, oh, it's a salad. My figure might need it.
Mine does. It's why he eats salads.
So, yeah, it's the turmoil and everything that we go through as loved ones.
Yeah.
It's so hard. And you said something at the beginning of the show that all these people that you went to for resources.
Yeah.
And all you wanted to do was, there's got to be a way, right? There's got to be a way. There's got to be a
Just
way.
tell me what to do to change this.
Just tell them what I need to do. Give me something. When my wife,
Somebody fix him.
right.
That's what I wanted.
When my wife went to a rehab and she had this counselor, and during a certain process of it, the counselor wanted to talk to me. She calls me in without my wife.
Okay.
She sits down and she goes, Al, how are you seeing all this? Now, me being like her, I'm putting all the blame on her, right? Not realizing I'm basically pissing fuel on the fire. And
Well,
it's
this was
not
probably
meaning
early
to.
in your
It
journey.
is. It
Yeah,
wasn't
yeah.
early.
Okay.
So not knowing that I was doing it,
Yeah.
okay, but I was still however, I was still making mistakes, right?
Yes.
So she literally put her hand on my leg, on my knee, and said, there's nothing you can do. And I looked at her square in the eye and I said, bullshit. Just like that. I said, you watch me. You watch me.
Right.
I will get her sober.
Yeah.
And she just sat there, okay, Al.
Mm.
And it took me, I don't know how long it was before I went, shit, she was right.
I can't. fix
There's
this.
nothing I can do.
If I could have loved, if you could love somebody clean, my son wouldn't be an addict right now. I believe your wife wouldn't be an alcoholic.
I think the
believe-
majority of people wouldn't.
I mean, and again, I know that everybody's situation is different, and I know that not everybody who is an addict is coming from a loving environment. I know that.
Right.
But if my love were enough, I wouldn't be still having a story to tell right now. It isn't. And even like when in his sober times, because he's been clean for, well, he went through prison and came out. I mean, so he'd been clean like 4 years straight of no meth. I don't want to be naive. I know that things get into prisons, but there was no meth for 4 years. And he came out, the kid I know. He came out now a young man, but he came out the person that I know. And in those times, we can have these amazing conversations and really raw and honest and quiet, and those conversations that go into the late night and the early, and he would look right at me and he goes, Mom, nothing you did made me use. I don't use because of you. And he's like, and there's nothing you could have done differently that would have changed it. Nothing. And he'll say that to me. And I'm so thankful that I've been able to have those conversations, because again, that does give me peace, and it gives me confidence, and it has given me calm in the chaotic moments when he's looking at me, telling me that I might as well put the needle in his arm. Because again, that's the slammed up to the ceiling, drop down to the floor. Like it happens to us all the time.
Yeah.
But it's just, I don't know, I guess. And if you said that person just asked you, what do I give me your advice? What can I do? I don't even know as a mom how I would answer that. I think my biggest thing that I would encourage anybody in that position. So if you're listening and this does fall into your category, that you are a parent or in a situation with a loved one that is struggling with addiction, find yourself a group that you feel safe and comfortable with to be able to have those conversations with. Because I think once I learned to come out of the cloud of shame that I put myself under, my world changed. So I dealt with this for years, not wanting to tell anybody really what was going on. And even a lot of my friends were like, they knew that there was always a little trouble with him. And he was always the kid that was kind of, giving us the hard time. And that was about what they knew. They knew that he was in trouble at school. They knew that he'd been expelled from school. They knew those things. But for people who don't have addiction in their families, it is extremely difficult for them to see or recognize or even acknowledge the beast that addiction is. They don't see that. They see the troubled kid. They see the abusive husband. They see the mean wife. They see the whatever. We put our titles. But it's hard for them to actually see addiction because it's an animal they don't know. Okay. So when that all started happening, everybody would see that we just had, well, it's always something, always something going on with him. And I didn't want to talk about it because the minute I would mention it, it's like, ooh, he does drugs.
It's like, stay away.
Don't play with my kids.
Mm-hmm.
We better not come to the picnic next weekend. Or, oh, if Bo's going to be there, maybe we'll avoid it. And I mean, I have very dear friends who didn't act like that. But I do have people that distance themselves from us. I have adult friends that I've lost over this because they didn't want to come near it with a 10-foot pole. And it's like, so you're going to judge me because I have a kid who got sucked into addiction. So whatever his demons are, I don't know it. I don't know what his demons are. I don't even know if he knows or can identify what his demons are that led him to use. But at that point now, you have written off people because of an addiction. And there's a quote that I came across. I wish I could have found it before we sat down today, and I'm going to botch it. So don't be mad at me. But it says something to the fact of, be careful how hard you judge that addict, because that might be the person that saves your kids someday.
Yeah.
And that hit me like in the most beautiful way one day when I found that quote. Because again, I do see my son as this very nurturing human being who I pray has the chance to get to the other side. And if that's the case, then I do think that he can be the person that could help somebody someday. And yet for the people out there who have judged me, cut me off, and I say me because it was me, it wasn't my kid. Because to this day, they still are not in my life. I mean, it wasn't just about him being a teenager in the home and they thought that that was a little too negative for their conservative tastes or something. It wasn't that. It's as an adult. I mean, my gosh, we've been empty nesters now for the last 4 years. And they're not here. So it's not about my son. It was about me. They were judging me.
Because they were looking
Because
at.
clearly I was a bad mom.
Yeah,
I did
of
something
course.
wrong, or I didn't
Yeah.
do something that I should have done right. I did have a friend say to me one time, this is early in his teenage years when it was always chaos. And I remember her saying to me, well, why don't you just take his phone away and tell him he can't?
Good call.
Oh my God. Why didn't I think
No
of that?
kidding, right?
And it's incredible how innocent somebody outside looking in can see that. You know, like to think that I never tried those basic disciplinary actions. He'd been grounded more times than I even know what to do with. He'd had phones taken away. I took the door off his bedroom room because I was like, if I can't trust you, you lost the right to have privacy in this house. This is my house. And while you're living in it, I need to know I can trust what is happening under my roof. And if I can't, you don't get a door to shut.
Yeah.
I mean, I've done everything. And I thought, just tell him he can't. And at some point, and again, I don't mean this to play the mom card, but the reality of it is that as a mom, and this is my son, he is bigger than me. I can't physically stop him. I am not strong enough to do it. I'm not big enough to do it. I'm not brave enough to do it, in all honesty. I'm not. I am not brave enough to haul off and punch my kid in the face and try to knock him out to stop it.
Yeah, right. Or knock some sense into them.
Right. And so that does leave us to, there was one time, even as a teenager, he looked at me and said, I know I'm grounded. I know you're telling me not to leave, but I'm going to go. I'll be back, but I got to go right now. That much respect, kind of, in a way, in his own way, that was
Right.
respect of
Yeah.
saying, I'm not abiding by the fact that you grounded me, but I'll be back. What could I have done? I couldn't physically stop him. So to all of that, the judgment is harsh. It's so harsh. You will lose friends over this. You will lose family over this.
Oh, heck yeah.
I don't even know. I've been able to go in my immediate family. There are some family members who it will be years have gone by before they've even asked me how I was doing. And this is my kid we're talking about.
See, and to me, that's so sad. And again, I really don't want to hang anything over their head. Because again, it's that not understanding,
Mhm.
right? Because we didn't
They're
understand
afraid of
for
it, I
years,
think.
right?
They're
We didn't
afraid of it.
understand it, and we were right there.
Right.
It's like there's certain individuals in my wife's family who I got along with until my wife's addiction.
Mhm.
And just because I made certain comments, not using names, just making certain comments or statements on my posts, I became a complete asshole. They don't want anything to do with me. Now, I look as is guilty conscience.
Yeah.
That's why,
They
and
felt
I
that you
could be
called them out
wrong.
on something they didn't want to be called out
Right,
on.
right.
Yeah.
And again, though, also, I give them some sympathy because they don't understand. They don't get it.
Yeah.
And I said on a show a couple of weeks ago, I said, I know a hell of a lot more about addiction than I did 2.5 years ago. And it's from doing these shows
Yeah.
and the guests that I've had.
Yeah.
And I says, I know about this much now.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
It's only this much. It's not this much.
Yeah.
I went from here to about here.
Yeah.
And I will never know probably this
I pray
because
to
I've
God we
not
don't.
walked in those shoes.
Well,
right?
so one of the things that Bo challenged me with was, when he was in prison the last time, was the whole You don't understand, Mom. You don't get it. And all I could say back to him was, excuse me, you are 100% right. I don't get it. Now, what I can tell you is since you have been arrested, since I have learned what it is that you're fighting. So and I don't mean that on his emotional level, I mean that on the substance level, right? So I know you and I have shared the opinion
Mhm.
that it's not as important. That's not the right way to word it. You can't just tell somebody to stop using because it's not about the substance that makes them the addict. It's about why they're using
Why
that makes them the
The
addict.
substance is just the band.
Yes, that's what
all
I was
it
trying to
is.
say.
Yeah.
So it's serving a purpose for them that even often those who are using cannot identify why. They only know that it is their default because it is the only place they know how to exist. Okay. So I've learned that. And once I understood what it was that he was dealing with, which is meth, I started doing all my homework. I started serving I sat on the board of DarJune House back in Green Bay. I started getting involved with St. John's Homeless Shelter. I started reading, voraciously reading. I read Tiffany Jenkins' book, The High Achiever. I read Nic Schef's book, Tweak. Don't want to read his dad's book yet, which is called Beautiful Boy, simply because it's a little hard to read your own story. And Nic Schef is a recovered meth addict who wrote the book Tweak to give the perspective from the meth user's addict perspective. His dad wrote the book Beautiful Boy to be told from the parent's point of view. And that's a little hard for me to read somebody else's. It was actually about 2 years ago, and I don't know how long it'll take me, but about 2 years ago, I started writing my own book. And just on the urging of many people, I've been told that my story is one that should get out there. So
Yeah.
started writing it down. We'll see if it ever goes anywhere. But with that being said, I've never read Beautiful Boy. But there's a couple other books that I'm drawing a blank at right now. Those were two clearly because those were the two most impactful to me. So I was able to say all of this to Bo. I have been volunteering, I've been reading, I've been studying, I have been learning the effects of and the science behind the use of meth. My husband and I started taking classes through NAMI, the National Association of Mental Illness, and started taking a family class there that teaches you all about mental illness and addiction. And it was a 12-week class that we took going once a week. I mean, we devoted time to this and learned and studied. And I said to him, I tell him all of these things. I rattle off that whole list. And I said, shy of trying meth and sleeping in a park, I have done everything I can to try to understand your perspective of this, or not even his perspective, but to try to understand what it is he's dealing with. Because those are the things he's dealing with, and to try to learn his mind a little bit. And I was able to throw back at him, what have you done? What have you done to try to learn my life? What have you done to try to learn a life without addiction? Have you been doing anything? Have you taken advantage of the classes that you could take in prison? Have you done anything? You haven't. So it was a good way to kind of call him and hold his toe to the line on that. But I was like, we as that loved one can only do so much. And I did feel like it was a responsibility of mine as a mother. I don't know if I would have felt this way as a spouse. I really don't. But it is different. But as a parent, I felt that I needed to try to learn this pain that my child struggles. And I did everything I could. Now, I'm not going to shoot up meth. I'm not going to smoke meth. I'm not going to do it. Whatever it is you do with meth, I'm not doing it. But
do you feel like you know what those troubles are? Did all that help?
It helped me understand it helped me understand the struggle that he has with addiction and with like maybe the chemistry of the brain of how that works and the dopamine, the overload versus how the receptors get. All of a sudden you start making more receptors, and then when you stop using, those receptors have to do something. And I'm horribly botching that if you know science.
They've got pictures of the brain.
Yes, but to me as a mom, I learned what I needed to it makes sense in my head. I'm just not good at regurgitating it. That all helped me to realize that it's not something you can just look at an addict and say, cut it out.
How many times do we do that?
Oh my gosh. In fact, before he went to prison the first time, I had taken him to a mental hospital where he stayed a week. They incorrectly diagnosed him with schizophrenia, which I later learned was meth delusions, which is not an official term. I've also learned that, but it is, there's another term for it, but the lay person's term is meth addictions.
Hallucinate or gosh, you just said it, and I don't even remember it either.
Meth delusions.
Meth delusion, yes, thank
Okay.
you. Thank you.
So that is what he was dealing with. Now, where that became a gift was that when he ended up going to prison, he was still struggling from auditory and visual hallucinations. He still had that prescription for the antipsychotics because he was given that, be it incorrect, but he was given the diagnosis of schizophrenia. So while he was in prison, he was able to be on that, which helped him get through that stage when his brain was still healing. So meth delusions can last for a year or up to 2 years after stopping use. It depends on how much you use, how long you use, the severity of your use. There are caveats to that. But those were lasting at that point, like it had been a solid year. And so thank God he did have that drug to take, that medication. They weren't great at giving it to him at first. That's part of the system.
Yeah.
But once he was sentenced and was going to prison, he was getting that med. Then that is when, because he was on that med, he had to see the psychiatrist in the prison. He wouldn't have had to see that guy if he didn't have that medication. So that was another gift. He was going to see this guy, this doctor. I don't mean to, sorry, not trying to be correct, this guy, the doctor. And that doctor looked at him after meeting with him several times and said, you don't have schizophrenia. You don't need this medication. So this man, under medical supervision, weaned Bo off of it, and he's never gone back on it. So now when he relapsed this last year, I did ask him at one point, are you having any hallucinations, any symptoms? And he said, I'm not. So it hasn't come back. I don't think he used very much this last time, relatively speaking. So it didn't return. But those are the things that I started to learn the pain. So when he first got that diagnosis, he was clean for 6 months. He's on antipsychotic, not using meth, clean and living in my house. And it was this was the adult child I'd never met. Like, who is this? And I fell back in love with him all over again as my son. And I said to him one day, I can't understand what it's like if you're fighting a craving every day to use whatever it is that is your choice to use, but I don't know what that feels like. So the closest thing I can come to that is sugar. Now, I work with a nutritionist for my own health, and he had taught me one time that, and I'll probably misquote it, so don't all get mad at me. Don't write into Al. He had told me one time that sugar is more addictive to the human body than cocaine. And I thought, holy cow, seriously? No wonder I'm a sugar, love my sugar. I'm a dessert girl all day long. If you put a table in front of me and there were chips or chocolate, I'm going for that chocolate every single time. And so when my son was working on that to stay clean, I said to him, I don't know what it is to struggle with that. So the only thing I know I'm addicted to is sugar. I'll give up sugar while you're giving up meth. Let's do this together. That is my way of trying to show you support with what you're giving up. I don't think I made it 3 hours. It's in my coffee creamer. It's in the bread. If you eat bread, it's in bread. If it's in everything. It's in our spaghetti sauce. It's in our peanut butter. It's in our, like, everything. Sugar's in everything. So did I openly go get a piece of candy? No, I didn't. Did I seek out a sweet or a dessert? No, I didn't. But I didn't make it 3 hours without having something that had sugar in it. So how could I then wag my finger at him?
Yeah. Well, that's the tough part. So I've said to a couple of people that don't understand, and again, still, we're all, even you and I are still learning, right? We don't understand 100%. Our cell phones, right? Our cell phones are,
They're a dopamine feeder.
are so much. What happens if you leave your cell phone at home and you've gone down the road a ways and you're not going to turn around and go back? You are going nuts, right? You're
all day long.
You're wondering, oh my gosh, I wonder who's called, I wonder who's text, right? And as soon as you walk in that door, you're grabbing it.
But you and I didn't grow up with that.
No, we didn't grow up.
So we can
with
go
it.
back and say, I didn't used to feel this connected to
Right.
this.
However, again, that's what that addict that's what they're going through, right?
Yeah.
Okay, I don't want to call them an addict. That's what those who battle the addiction are going through.
Yeah.
It's that constant thump on the head going, hello,
Yeah.
you need me, it's time, right? And they're jabbing you every single way. And then your brain starts coming up with ways to justify. Yeah, my spouse got mad at me, or my parent got mad at me, and I don't want to deal with it.
It can be as simple
Right?
as that,
It can-
or it can be, I lost my job,
Yeah,
or it can be,
or a guy flipped me off down the road,
Yes,
or
yes.
it's life.
my car got dinged in the
right?
parking lot. It's
It's-
all
it's
those things we
life.
deal with on
Yeah.
a daily basis,
And some of us handle it in some ways.
but they have to
Different.
learn coping mechanisms.
Yeah.
And like for my son, who started his use so young, he has never developed those coping mechanisms. So that would be my wish for him now when he gets out this next time is that's what it is.
Yeah.
He has shown me that he can go months without using. It's not the use, it's the coping. And when one thing goes wrong in life, that's his default. So that is to me what I have started to learn. And that is what all of those classes and all of that learning did for me. It wasn't that I understand what his demons are. It just helped me to understand maybe what his brain is going through while struggling with
Yeah.
staying clean or not staying clean. So instead of getting mad at him, I was able to find compassion. And, that's what truly reading Nic's book, Tweak. That was the biggest thing I gained from that book, was just learning how to be angry at the meth and not angry at Bo, how to have compassion and find forgiveness.
Yeah,
My husband read the book, my other son read the book, and we were all able to start to get a little calmer and a little more forgiving. Again, doesn't let him off the hook for what he did,
of
doesn't,
course, yeah.
but it allowed us now to understand a little bit of what that drug was doing to him. And I know you and I have talked about that it's get mad at the meth, don't get mad at the person
Yeah.
who's using.
And my good friend Margaret Thompson, who's been on the show a couple times, she does family recovery, and she talked about that. She's like, why does the addiction get off scot-free? Why is it that it's the person we love that we're always thrashing? It's the addiction just, I'll just stand over here in the corner and let them thrash on them,
Yeah.
and I'll come back.
If
right?
alcohol could become a person, if meth could become a person, if heroin could become a
Yeah.
person, what would you do? What would you say? So I'm going to tell a story that's going to show a little evil side of me, a little wicked side of me.
Okay,
I went to visit my son for the very first time ever in a prison. Okay, something I swore I would never be that girl. I literally grew up in Mayberry, and I find myself on a freaking Jerry Springer show. I don't know how it happened. I don't know how I got there, but here I am. And I was driving to the prison and terrified, shaking, panic attack even, because I'm thinking, I don't know how to walk. I don't know. I'm scared to death to walk into a prison. I was very, very fortunate that my brother answered the phone when I called, and he was able to just say the right things to me to calm me down. And so I was able to walk in there feeling calm and confident, which I wasn't half an hour before that. But as I'm sitting, so for those of you who've never been to a prison, and don't recommend it, depending on the prison, I don't have to speak, and because he wasn't in a maximum security, he didn't have to be behind glass. So you go into this great big huge visiting room, and there's a low table between you, and that's so that you can't pass anything under the table. So there's this very low, lower than a coffee table between you. And the inmate has to sit in one color chair. The visitor has to sit in another color chair. It's very controlled. Every table is numbered. When I walk in the room, they say, who are you here to see? Okay, table number 4. And then there's these guards are standing up watching the room at
Right,
all. Okay.
right.
Okay. So my son comes in, we're allowed to hug a short hug, which is watched, but we're allowed to hug a short hug. And then we sit down on opposite sides of the table. I am the one who's allowed to get up and go to the vending machine and get a drink or a snack for him. He's not allowed to get up out of his chair without raising his hand and a guard assisting him. So I stood to get up and go get something from the vending machine. And during that time, I'd noticed that at the table next to us, there was a young man who kept looking over, and just kept looking. And I thought, okay, this is sketching me now, right? And so I get up to go get something from the vending machine for Bo. And I come back and I notice this guy is just watching. So I sit down and I'm trying to talk without moving my mouth because I'm good in covert, right? I can do this. So I'm
I just
looking,
became a ventriloquist.
I'm looking at him and I was just like, okay, don't look now. But at the table next to us, and I'm trying to do that, like, oh yeah, because I'm so cool. Anyway, I just asked him, I said, the guy 2 tables over keeps looking at you. Do you know him? Or does he like have it in for you? Is this a bad scenario? Like, what's happening? And so he very nonchalantly over the next few minutes, is able to steal a glance or whatever. And he looks at me and he goes, oh, yeah, that's so-and-so. That's the first guy who ever sold me meth. I know him. He's the one I got started with him. And I went, what? And he looked at me and he goes, yeah. And he's from a certain town and I knew where I didn't know the kid, but I knew the circumstance. And I looked at Bo, I didn't miss a beat. I didn't crack a smile. And I said, I literally want to go stab him in the throat. And he goes, Mom. And I said, are you kidding me? I don't want to swear on your podcast. I would kill every effort that ever introduced you to meth. And the fact that I think you maybe have introduced it to somebody else makes me just as angry at you.
Yeah.
And so I get that made me so angry that person sitting right there is the reason I'm sitting right here. Oh, I could have ended up behind those bars if I would have reacted the way I wanted to in that moment.
I can imagine.
I couldn't believe that I actually had the opportunity to identify what started this. Now, that didn't start Bo's addiction. That was just meth. There was addiction before that. Meth was just something that came along the way that became his favorite, Bo has often said to me, and will say it to anybody who asks him, and I know that he would approve of me saying this. He will say every time, meth is the best high you'll ever have in your life. Don't ever do it. Don't. And that's one thing that I try to look at with compassion and say, for people who have overcome addiction, or for people who are working on overcoming an addiction, how frustrating or how scary it must be, almost depressing, to know that you will never again in your life feel that good. You can't ever have that feeling again. Now, what I would hope they learn is that there are other things in life that give you amazing feelings of joy and happiness, and it's a different high.
And you know what it is.
But you'll never have that high again that your brain told you is the one you need. Like, you can have a high because you just had a baby and you get to look at this brand new baby, and that's a whole different high, right? We as healthy people can always look at that and say, oh my gosh, but that's the best high you'll ever have. Or I don't know. I mean,
well, it's so to elaborate on that, and we got to wrap this up pretty soon.
Okay.
To elaborate on that, so I've had some guests come on the show that said literally they thought whatever their drug of choice was, that's the best high.
oh, okay.
However, they said you only get that once. You're chasing it the rest
The
of
rest
the
of the
time.
time you use.
You're chasing because you're like the first time. It's like the first time I did cocaine,
Okay.
right? First